Hi everyone, I really like the expectation to find here friends, fun, and most importantly, fools. Because I think the fools in the good sense of the word is probably what all of us are here. Because you must be a little bit crazy to do things in a new way, which is not really, as Clara said, even though it's been here for as long as humans are here, the real sort of embracing of community work is pretty foolish in a way, in a good sense. And I feel I'm among my tribe of friends, fools, and people who love fun. So let's have some today. As I was introduced, I would like to use this day today as a little bit of a retrospective to share what I learned, what I wish I knew 15 years ago. I started building communities about, I almost wanted to say 25 years old, but then you would guess how old I am. But but I will look at the journey from about 15 years. Penguins actually, well, frankly, I just like the photo. But I needed to make up the story why penguins. Penguins, I found out, are one of the most community-friendly animals. Pretty much everything they do as a community. They do it together. One fact I especially like is that there is no concept of alpha males in penguins. So everybody's kind of equal. That's really interesting. So, you know, we are here a community. I would actually like to start with you folks. It was great to see that many of you work with community, has done quite a bit of work. If you look at the work with communities you did so far, right? What's your biggest learning? You know, Ladja, I will let people speak. That's a community conference. So let's grab the slides. So shout out to me. I will repeat it to microphone for anyone. What is some of the biggest learnings you made in your community journey so far? One. 1 plus 1 equals 3. Thank you. It's a lot of work. With fun and fools in a good way. What else? You can never please everyone, yeah? It takes time, lots of time. Woohoo! Oh, huge, amazing stuff. Perfect. Couple more? You never know how many people will come. You know, as I will share, I will use lots of examples of my largest community, which is now pretty much the biggest community for IT learning in the world. But we started with the first meetup. We had 6 hostesses paid by Google and 4 attendees. And we are thinking, well, maybe we are fools, a little too much of a fool. But it kind of worked out. One last. Say it again. You always need more beer. You know, the meetups in Italy I was running, they have wine on the meetup, of course. They have it before the meetup, during the meetup, and after the meetup in 3 separate installments. So we need all of this. Now, I want to share some of my learnings, but most importantly to show where I think we are all heading here. And I have a wildly optimistic view. So feel free to ground me today, but as a opening speech, I want to take like a really 10,000 feet view and have a look at what really may be possible. So about the past 15 years, I was somewhere here in 2007. No, this is the right photo. So these are my fellow co-founders of Google User Group, which I will use on lots of examples, which then transformed to Google Technology User Groups, then Google Developer Groups, and who knows where it will take us. We have many folks here from the current version of Goog in the room, so feel free to grab them and hear their experiences. But when we founded a couple of years, it was a really slow journey, like really like those 4 people, then 8, etc. After, we did some amazing things, actually. I don't know if you know, but the first hackathon, the first event in the Czech Republic, which was labeled hackathon, was happening not in Prague, Brno. Who is from Brno? Brno, first hackathon, exactly. and we didn't know really how to do it, so we tried to lure people. We had massages, we had some live music, these kind of things, but it was quite fun. So with Goog, we really explored quite a few new things to do. Later on, I found out that there is actually something similar happening in Silicon Valley, founded by Van Riper. Later on, Van Riper and I became both hired by Google and sort of driving the growth. But Van, we have always this friendly discussion who was the first. I'm quite lucky to have an invitation to our first meetup, which happened about 4 months before his meetup. But from the historical perspective, 4 months is nothing, really. So we started at approximately the same time. In about 2009, we had the first European Community Summit, which wasn't in Brno, wasn't in Prague, was in Krakow. The first sort of expansion happened in Poland, actually. Outside of Czech Republic and Silicon Valley. In 2011, we had the first global summit, the first community builders meetup. Then, this wild ride started for me for about 5 years, which completely broke my sleep due to jet lag and sort of made me appreciate staying at home and doing nothing. Because we really, together with Ben and the team, helped expand the GDG pretty much globally. So right now, what it looks like, well, it's not even right now. It's about 2 years ago when I left Google to work with communities like yours, get my hands dirty with some of the more diverse work. So one thing I learned along the way is that communities, I sometimes ask people, what's your definition of community? Now my take is like, who cares? Whatever, give me a break, let's do stuff, And so one way to look at a community, it's a structure. And sometimes we put a little too much effort of thinking like, what is a chapter? Is there a chapter leader or not? Then we say there is no chapter leader. But one template doesn't work universally. When working with our communities in Russia and Ukraine, the concept of a flat sort of structure is kind of foreign. So I needed to introduce a role of a sort of like community manager, lead. We even printed business cards and everything was nice again. So really give yourself a freedom not to worry too much about the structure. I talked to a few community builders actually a couple of days ago, and one person said, well, it's a process even. It's changing all the time. You can look at a community as a group of people who goes through some journey. In companies, and I will be talking a lot today about how to use our principles in companies, we look at how this is a way to organize people and finally creating stuff. And that's something which really excites me. Because when you take all the power, all the passion, all the ideas, all the connections, there is fantastic stuff being created. And I will mention a few things. Well, one thing which sort of is, in my opinion, given to all communities, and I will be happy to debate this over the booze and beer and everything, are a few elements. And let me present all of them to you. The first one, obviously, values, mission, passion. That's what connects us. That's what basically attracts you. That's what giving you the sense of why should I be a member of this community. Wow, I guess you didn't expect these communities. Brno again, by the way. This is about 5 years ago. And, interestingly, this was on a May parade for people outside of the Czech Republic who may not realize this. This was a story. In media, it was presented as a story of a confrontation, right? We have like this big energy happening here. But when I look at it, I see people who maybe even be sharing the same interest, like the best thing for the Czech Republic. My value is nation, maybe. And both of them took it differently. And it really connected them very strongly along the way of what kind of action do we take, what kind of norms, what kind of behaviors we see as important. And on the end of the day, you got two very energetic people basically exchanging energy, so to speak. I'm not absolutely putting any judgment to this. What I really like this, it's an example of how actually the shared sort of like vision, the passion, can really influence the community. Now, this is an evolution of the GOG logo. I think there were even a couple more, right, Philip? Yeah. But this is what I remember. So see, our first logo, it was really, Yeah, that was quite something. But that's how we saw our community back then. We told our designer, you know, it must be fun, it must be easy, it must be grungy, put some Google word in there and show us. And he made this. After some time, we realized that our initial sort of vision, our initial idea didn't quite hold to like Google, because Google is everything. So then we split into educators, developers, and each of these little communities have their own sort of like vision, or own mission, own sense. Now, you know, about 10 years back, it's merging again to like one GUG. So it's evolving. Like, don't be afraid to actually rethink what the mission could be. The second, obviously, relationships and emotions, and they can take, you know, all kinds of sort of attributes. It can be plus, it can be minus. I like the happy stories. You might not see it well here in the room. This is one of our many community babies, created as a community effort between two community organizers. And that relates to the fact that communities are kind of like based on strong relationships and at the same time require the strong relationships. It's this like positive cycle. One thing I learned is that I can't really complain about people having conflicts or, you know, fighting with each other, because then it means that they care, that they have this like relationship, this strong feeling of relationship. Somebody is maybe the future mother of my child. Somebody else is a complete asshole. I really don't like what you do for the community. Still, it's about, really, it's about relationships, emotions. So I learned over the years to really make this one of my sort of like primary way of looking at communities. What kind of relationships do we have? If we had conflicts, I sort of celebrated it in a way, because it meant people really care. Interactions and activities. So when you have people around a mission vision, when they form relationships, they need to do something. Like, we don't go just to a event just because. I think in GUC, I once had to explain in Google, what does it mean in an after party before the event before? Essentially, we just went to have a beer together, right? And that was at a time that like it was all event driven. So the interactions means that people get together around a certain activity you throw to them. And I made so many mistakes, by the way. I initially thought of this talk to make it just like kind of like fuck up a morning talk about everything. That didn't work out, but this is one of the things I really believed it will work. It did not. We sort of created a subgroup among the community managers that we hoped that would capture the wisdom, that the knowledge that the community is creating. And we called it Wisdom Keepers. We had t-shirts. We even had a call sign. It was like this, W, wisdom, we are wisdom keepers. We even had a global summit for this, and it absolutely didn't work out. Do you have any idea why, by the way? Too broad, in a way, yeah, because we said let's capture wisdom, but I was prepared for this. So we even had an intranet, we had some tools, we had some roles, so it was kind of focused. Another idea? Why community organizers were not becoming wisdom keepers? They are too busy. And by being busy, people tell you, I don't have time for this. And when they tell you, I don't have time for this, they mean this is not my priority. And when they mean this is not my priority, they say, this is not about the passion, the mission I have in this community. Well, we had community builders, we had event managers, we had developers, we had speakers. We had none of knowledge management folks, right? So they tried, it failed. So here the interactions, the activities didn't quite fit into the community. So we kept it, you know, the good old way of doing our stuff, which was meetups, hackathon, big conferences such as the Fest. And in a way, that was the output, that was the creation of the community. At the same time, that was the way to meet, to interact. I was talking to Eva Pavlikova from Česko Digital 2 days ago, actually. And I realized that in that community, I will mention later on again, the interaction is the activity and the output itself, basically. Like people gather around all kinds of activities, they do stuff together, they interact, and as a result, you get an output. Sometimes the output don't work either. We had an initiative that a couple folks came quite a few years ago and said, hey, we'll do a newsletter about Google technologies because nobody writes about Google technologies. 2009, okay. And it sounded great until we realized that the question came up, so where is the community in this? And these two guys said, well, we will be writing it ourselves for the community. And we said, well, look, like our value is that we do everything with the community and for the community. How can we transform this? And they said, well, that's true. So they started like crowdsourcing the newsletter, and that was then working quite well. Now we have about like 7 million media sending newsletter about Google, so no need for this. So this is sort of like the external shape and form. And you may realize I'm not talking about governance, I'm not talking about onboarding, offboarding, my favorite word, involuntary offboarding, which is, by the way, one of the hardest things to do. You know, the next time I'm here on the conference, I want to have a workshop about how to involuntarily offboard a community member. And by the way, anybody here did it? Anybody needed to tell to your community member, hey, this is not a good place for you? Okay, only 3 hands. It will come one day, and it won't be easy. But the most important thing actually is in the inside. And I was looking for a few like icons of a person, but everything was so cheesy and corporate-y that I started just with this. But you can imagine that this represents a person, right? It must be very people-centric, person-centric. And actually, the more I work with communities, I realize that this is really the core. It's all about people, actually. It's about the individuals. And I think you may think this is quite a paradox. Like, we are building a community, so why to look at an individual? And sometimes when I speak to community builders, and I ask them, what do you think that is the driver for your individual members to be here? And they say, well, they do stuff for community. We contribute to this like huge idea. We want to move the world. And I ask, well, but what's in it for them personally? And sometimes they struggle. And I think this is a fair and very important question. And again, one of my learnings over the 15 years is to put more emphasis on this question. And to summarize what I sort of like learned and found during these years are 3 elements. One is belonging. Each of us, we are herd animals, after all, look for our own tribe. I don't like the word family too much. Families are a little bit too tight, sometimes not too positive an environment, sometimes too small. Tribe is better. So when we find a tribe, we are happy. I mean, even the introverts, it says, I don't hug. but you can really make a tribe even for introverts. Yeah, you can order this t-shirt for conferences if you are a little bit too uncomfortable. On some of the conferences we made, I'm sort of like half introvert myself, we made like meditation rooms, we made prayer rooms, and we made introvert rooms, right? Where you could just go and chill out because you have been a little too much connected. Keep calm and drink red wine. Do you know what country was this meetup in? France, exactly. And that was one of the early meetups. And I asked people, one person from this meetup came on later and said, this is so great you are doing these meetups. It was the early days of the developer community. I said, okay, what do you like? Maybe the speaker, maybe the pizza, maybe the red wine before and after. He says, no. He says, just look around. And he sort of like waved his hand. And I see, like very strong IT developers types around the room. And he says, these are the normal people, not like on the street, right? So we look people with whom we can be normal. Talking about objects in Java on a lunch with your in-laws may not be the best idea, but here everybody will understand. So they found their tribe, and that was so important. The other one is contribution. And that's, we feel that by doing in the community, we contribute to the well-being of the community, but also to something else. And this is quite amazing that even people who might be, I'm not saying like selfish by nature, but you basically do your stuff, you live your life, you come into the community and suddenly you do stuff for others. And there is, again, psychological research which shows that all of us have this drive to contribute, to give out. The neurosciences say that the charity work gives us the same sort of neurological reaction as when we have a good food, somebody praises us, we have intimate physical relationship, right? And we contribute. So I had this experience on, shortly after I left Google, I was helping the Milion Chvilek movement here in the Czech Republic, which a few years ago did these huge civil activism demonstrations in Prague. I was helping with the second letna, the second one. I was sometimes like thinking, okay, I started from 4 people on an event to 300,000 on an event. I don't think I will beat it. I don't want to beat it. I don't wish we had these demonstrations again. But I was then walking among one of our volunteers, like after the demonstration was being dissolved. And I asked her, so what did you do here? And she was like standing at these like little lines, which made the corridors like here. And she says, well, what I did here, I made sure that we really bring this political change. And I was basically making sure that this whole event doesn't collapse. I was like, okay. And what did you do? And she says, well, I was basically guarding these 4 lines here, so that people like don't, change their sectors, and the health professionals can come and people can leave. And trust me, she tells me, if there were some occasions that if we didn't do this, the complete chaos would emerge, and you guys on the stage, would have to stop and So it's quite amazing that, and she was right. Like she wasn't the top speaker, she wasn't the person who brought this all together, but she had her own little piece and felt very rightly and truly that she contributed to the greater vision of this event. So the contribution can be one of the really strongest elements of a community. That's what making us apart from teams, from project teams, from companies. And finally, growth. How do we grow with communities? I didn't share that besides of Google developer groups, we also started Google educator groups and Google business groups. All the 3 of them started here in the Czech Republic, but then they were escalated to mostly emerging markets region. The educator group, that was one of my most passionate groups, because the growth, it was basically for teachers who taught like digital technologies on schools, on elementary schools, and they were feeling kind of alone. So we gave them the growth meant I am not alone. That was maybe belonging. They grow in the sense that they learned new stuff, because around their fellow teachers, they didn't really get this. Actually, they get lots of opposition. Like the teachers were really afraid of those like progressive folks who were bringing technology. They wanted to learn from one another, because I wanted to hear an experience from you, how you did it in the school, how did you survive the incredible pressure. They get to know people in the education sector, so they grew by connections. There are all these kind of things, and it's always good to ask, what is that your community members grow with? In our Google developer group, sometimes people say, I want to be closer to Google. Fair, why not? And they then contributed to the better of the entire community. So if we look at this is basically, I yet have to find a community which would not fall into these basic principles. And also, like, if you look at your community, if you look at what problems may be, maybe one of the problems you might come with is, my community isn't active enough on a discussion board. Maybe we need to change to a different software, right? I don't have any software here, any platforms. It may mean that the mission may not be too strong. People are confused. Maybe the relationships are not great. Maybe you are just talking, not creating, right? In GDGs, we always said, after you get to our community, join any team, any project, but make sure that within sort of like 3 months, you are a part of something which results in a creation of maybe a meetup or a conference, because it's really motivating. Now, you may be thinking, why in the world we still in companies work like this. I mean, not really like this, of course, not anymore. It doesn't look like this. But if you look on the surface, it's kind of like this. Like the values, like you read them on some posters, right? The belonging, the relationships, in the tribal leadership theory, many teams are actually fighting, inside of each other. So you may be thinking, why in the world don't we use these community principles everywhere? Because it generates energy. You can create stuff in a sort of like stronger way than in those like alienated teams. You can collaborate better together because you are driven, you do stuff with people who are friends, fools, and you have fun together. That was a really nice way to put it in the morning. You learn a lot because you share, you are open, you feel psychological safety, so you are open to sharing your even fails and stuff. It may be kind of financially effective in the long run. In the short run, it takes time, maybe 1 year, until a community really starts delivering sort of whatever value you would like to see from this. But what I want to show really briefly is where I see that this may take us. First, in organizations. The first is that lots of value that you want to create externally can be done by communities. I had a company in the US, a little software as a service e-learning platform, and we were running these sort of user group meetups for our clients. And they really liked us, but not so much because of the product or ourselves, but because we were a platform to bring everybody else to the room. You can use it for marketing, ambassadors. You can have a community of ambassadors like this Pilsner Urquell project that Andrea Hurichoa told me about the other day, that basically you build a community of bartenders. They find, they feel they belong, they have the shared passion, and at the same time they spread the word about your project. You can run client meetings where clients actually come and bring people from their companies and maybe buy another product from you. I'm working with a company which is doing exactly this, and the clients have fun on the meeting. They have free beer, and maybe they will get another project. User support, the Trailblazers community of Salesforce is one of the most successful communities for this product board, obviously, for feedback, for innovation, for sort of connecting all of this. And I guess we'll hear a little bit more about this today. The other one, it's really interesting, it's internal functions. And there we look at internal processes. I'm working with a bank where we sort of replicate not 20%, but a 120% project in which people can actually form a community and they build projects in their free time, basically. That's the 20% over 100. We have a community of practice. I built a community in Google of people working regionally with our community programs, but together they were forming a community. And once a year, we always met somewhere, and that was a way for me to sort of like bridge regions, teams, etc. Let me skip to the third one, and that's strategic initiatives. And that's sort of getting deeper than just sort of like company function. I'm working with 3 banks at this moment. I can't name any of them because the products are still in the making and I don't want to steal the fame from the people who run this. But in one of the bank, they actually transformed their trainings to community-based trainings. So instead of, the people coming to some boring trainings, they meet together in a sort of like mastermind way of learning, and the HR just supports them with some facilitation guide, with some tools, etc. The effectiveness as measured by the usability of what they learned raised from about 65% to 91%. That's pretty amazing. See, community-based learning. Finally, you can have an entire organization as a community or a project. Burning Man, right? It's and there are actually so many of these DIY festivals around the world where basically the festival is whatever the community makes it a festival. Even here in the Czech Republic during the summer, we have some of these efforts. Česko Digital is one of the examples for me, together with Red Button, where basically the entire organization is a community, and the organization actually, in the case of Red Button, makes business. In the case of Česko Digital, creates projects that are super helpful and useful for some ecosystems. So that's really interesting. Now, I think that the question is not if to use communities, but when. There is no reason why the companies shouldn't start using the principles that all of you here actually use in your communities. I would say all of us here may be sort of like the flag bearers to the big change in the 15 years, where maybe the word community will become as ubiquitous as the word communication, for example. I am a community manager. I am a communication manager. I think like in the future we'll be looking at how do we make people collaborate on stuff in what we call communities. Now, before I leave, there is always this question, can everything really be built in a community? So I wanted to do this experiment, right? If we build a bridge in a community with almost no, not almost, without any management, without any planning, without even any like rules almost, we had only like 3 rules for this. And the opportunity came on Google I/O 2017, I believe. It's the biggest developer conference for Google. And I always used to manage what was called community lounge. It was like the biggest area, and during the 4 days we had always about 7,000 people coming there. So I was thinking, why don't we try to build this Kapla bridge over here? Well, let me show you what happened. And can we have a voice, please? Sound? Yeah, if you click on the crossed over. Okay, never mind. Just look at this. Yes. Never mind, we don't need music. But look at this. I wanted them to build to write down like hello world in their favorite language, make a bridge out of it and put it to social media. Very happy, but quite a fail. See, is this a bridge? So maybe everything I was saying here is wrong. Bridge. But even Google liked it, people loved it, and eventually I made this video out of it so that at least we have something. So the problem here was that the vision, the mission for the bridge, we didn't have the same one like I had. I wanted them to build a bridge, but the way we described it was that the most important thing here is to have fun and put it on social media. But I didn't give up, so I was then running a few workshops where I sort of like sneaked in with this exercise. And see, can we have the next slide, please? And one more, please. One more slide. Yes. See, this is exactly what I needed. Everything can be built. We just needed to change a little bit of the rules. And with that, I want to say everything can be built. It will take time. It will take fails. You will need to backtrack. You will need to realize what the hell are you doing. But on the end of the day, you will be building the bridges like we do. With that, my friends, I will pass to another one. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, for a great presentation. We have a couple of questions on the slide for you. So, if you are up to them, we can do like 2 of them. Because the first one is, Dan, why do communities break apart usually?
Pardon?
Why do communities break apart?
Interestingly, because they become too good sometimes. And by too good, I mean too close. They don't bring new people together. I had one country, I will not name it. The community was so good, we didn't pay any attention to it. And then I realized almost everybody is gone. Because they didn't bring in any new people, they didn't leave them. The second one, if the community is good, it grows huge. And remember, relationships, emotions, interactions. It's much easier to interact with 20 people than 200, than 2,000, right? So this may be another reason. And finally, there is a mismatch between the vision and what's actually happening. I was asking GDG folks, why are they leaving joining about 10 years after, because we started GDG as a way to bring this like innovative new garage technology by Google. There were like 5 developer technologies in 2007, about 50,000 in 2017. And they didn't say technology. They said, because this is a family. This is a friendly IT family. No IT family is as friendly as this. And we evolved it. So evolution is necessary.
And there, the second question is, what free communities are motivating you? What's your inspiration?
Say it again.
Motivational communities. Which do you follow? Which do you like?
Okay.
Three of them.
Yeah. So one community I started being quite active in is Red Button. I just mentioned. I'm quite amazed that even though like it's people who are like business consultants and sometimes these like types which work with B levels, they are like people like us. Some fools. They have fun. They drink beer. So that's one community. The other community I really like is a community of a friend of mine. He started it originally for his friends. Now it's evolving. They do one of these sort of like Burning Man festivals during the summer. They do it sort of like under the radar, so it's not quite public, but I like sort of the sense of freedom. And that's like what you get in a community. You can be free, you can be among normal people.